So I have a theory that this new N7 is definitely not Shepard, and that they currently have orders to eliminate Liara, making them an antagonist in Mass Effect 5. And the reason why I believe this is because of the most important tease for the next Mass Effect so far. This tweet by the executive producer of Mass Effect, Mike Gamble, that says, "Everything you've seen from all N7 days will connect," meaning that the key to answering who the N7 is and their primary purpose is very likely the connection between N7 Day 2024, 2023, and 2022. The N7 code's name, the Cerberus-colored relay, and this audio transcript of Liara's dialogue link everything together. And for my regular P7s who've seen some of these connections before, this single video links every theory from the past 3 years about the N7 into one definitive theory. And in my next 2 videos, I'll be putting out my best theories on what everything in the relay tease means, followed by what's actually going on with the Krogan Civil War. Everything will connect. So buckle up, P7s. These next few videos will be about how everything links together, and why those connections make me very excited for Mass Effect 5. To kick everything off, we'll start with how this Gamble blog post led to one of the biggest teases for the N7's identity. We had initially received the blog on N7 Day 2023, which was littered with 1s and 0s. And once we paired all the 1s and 0s together, it looked like this, which seems like gibberish at first, but actually forms a word in binary code. Each string of 8 stands for a letter, which makes the initial code from the blog spell out epsilon. Putting this into a URL, we received this initial tease, which contains the biggest hint to the N7's identity. First off, in the short 5-second clip, we initially see a Krogan in the back here, which I'll chat about more in the 3rd video of this 3-part series. An important part of this clip right now, though, are these Cerberus-colored canisters here. This will connect later on with the Cerberus-colored relay, and it also means that wherever this N7 is walking, it's likely in a Cerberus facility. Putting the clip aside for now, though, when we examine the text itself in this Epsilon tease, this is where it gets really interesting. Out of the theories I've seen, most focus only on the text itself, like how to actually crack this code and what the Andromeda distress signal means. However, I think the most important part here is actually the forward slashes before every line, because forward slashes are used primarily through computers to run commands. Now, if we couple this with Gamble's binary code from earlier, that's 2 for 2 with computer-based teases, and more specifically, with teases related to artificial intelligence. AIs use both binary code and forward slashes all the time to process information and to run code. So very likely what we're seeing in this Epsilon tease is an AI executing commands and receiving information back. And of course, since the machine code here is coupled with a clip of the new N7, this means the N7 is likely the AI executing said code, which Gamble kind of confirmed himself with his reply to this tweet. When directly asked if the N7 was a robot/AI, Gamble dodged the question, instead asking, "What's a person?" We're definitely coming back to this thought later on, because I think this question might reveal one of the main themes of Mass Effect 5. For now though, Gamble's reply here was likely to draw attention to the possibility of the N7 being an AI, which, coupled with the binary code and the command slashes, means to me that this N7 is very likely an artificial intelligence. Back to the Epsilon tease, we'll go over what each line of this executed code actually means in a little bit, because first, we have to figure out definitively who this N7 AI actually is, and the answer to that is directly connected to N7 Day 2024 and the name of the N7's coat. I distinctly remember 2 years ago that no one thought that the Veilguard crossover event meant anything. However, once again, Gamble has said that all N7 days will connect, which means that all the items we got here are very relevant to the next Mass Effect, with one of those items being the new N7's very sleek coat, and another one being the helmet. The helmet itself is called Command Helmet, which I think is a hint at what its true purpose is. Way back when this illustration of the N7 first dropped, I mentioned that the helmet definitely couldn't fit a person's head in it, the gaps on the side being the first major issue. But honestly, the entire part here just looks off. And now we know that the connection between N7 days reveals that this is a command helmet, which to me means that this section of the helmet is likely where the AI's commands are run, like the code it executed in the Epsilon tease. So this is basically its processing unit, not an actual helmet that can be removed. And as to how it specifically processes information, another item from N7 Day 2024 gave us the likely answer. This command armor note from Lace Harding has the clue, where Harding herself said, "I guess this chest got lost in the fade, and someone shepherded it to our doorstep." Is it just me, or does the armor look somehow familiar, like something an old friend would wear? Honestly, this is one of my favorite teases of the bunch, because it requires a small multiversal twist on who Harding is voiced by. That multiversal twist being that Harding is voiced by Ali Hillis, who also plays Liara. So this note is likely being secretly said by Liara, not Harding, and she's referring to this N7 armor being something an old friend would wear. And obviously, the closest friend she had who was an N7 was Shepard. So if the hint here was that this coat is Shepard's, does that mean that the N7 is Shepard? Can this N7 be both Shepard and also be an AI? Well, I think the coat's name holds the answer to this conundrum, which is Spectre of Battles Past. Now in the trilogy, a Spectre was someone who answered to the Citadel Council. And of course, Shepard was obviously also a Spectre. So that's already another hint at this N7 being Shepard. However, the spelling of the word Spectre here gives us the true story of how this is Shepard, because this spelling of Spectre actually stands for ghost, wraith, or phantom, which would mean the coat's name is technically Ghost of Battles Past. Now, some theories think this means that the N7 is simply Shepard back from the dead, which is completely valid based on other teases too. However, in this theory at least, I believe this means that this is Shepard in AI form. The new N7 likely has Shepard's past data and is now executing code while acting like the commander. I want to be very clear though, this is probably not our Shepard. It's very likely an imitation of the real one. So after connecting 2 N7 days, we've arrived at the answer that this new N7 is a Shepard AI. But now, naturally, we have to ask ourselves, why? Why would the Systems Alliance, who controls the N7 program, create a Shepard AI in the first place? I think the connection between the Epsilon text from earlier and N7 Day 2022 holds the answer. Since we're assuming that this text represents the Shepard AI executing commands and also processing information, then how it breaks this secondary encryption is fascinating. There are 3 parts to breaking this encryption, with the first being a Caesar cipher. If we shift each of these letters over by 19 in the English alphabet, then we get the word oculon. But the other 2 parts to the code are broken by these other teases. One of them is related to the Andromeda distress signal sent in a particular year. With our knowledge from the games, besides for the Quarian arc, we don't currently know about any distress signals, so this is likely a clue about Mass Effect 5. And after trying out a few different year combos, the correct year is actually 2819, the year Arc Hyperion arrived in the Helios cluster. As a quick aside, I'll dive more into what the distress signal itself could mean in the next video, so make sure you subscribe to catch that one. Otherwise, the next code clue is the audio transcript of a line we heard during N7 Day 2022's tease, featuring Liara.
Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate. I can see it differently. How did we miss this? Was the most ridiculous.
So the code word here is Defiance, and the full broken code is Oculon 2819 Defiance. Before we move on to the Oculon tease itself, it's very important to note that on the relay tease from N7 Day 2022, we can see an N7 stripe here in the bottom left corner, which gives us a clue into one of the Shepard AI's purposes. Just quickly though, before getting into that clue, this stripe also matches the reflection of Shepard's N7 stripe when we first began the trilogy, but it's opposite to each other. Once again, one more hint that the new N7 is a reflection of Shepard, but not actually the commander. Back to the Shepard AI's purpose though, when Gamble was asked a couple years ago if the N7 was on this relay, he replied, "Maybe it's connected." And now we obviously have confirmation that it is indeed connected. But I think initially, this N7 stripe was meant to specifically connect the new N7 to this relay's construction. If we look at the bottom text here, it contains a damning piece of evidence to that link. This line that reads, SA 314 110790, a few other numbers, and then FileBat. We'll go over what the 314 means in the next video, but for now, these three clues help explain what the new N7 is likely doing here. The SA likely stands for Systems Alliance, making this relay constructed by humanity. Liara saying, although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance, also backs up that this is a human-led project. And we also see over here the phrase FileBat, which likely stands for a bat file, or in other words, a batch file. Batch files are used to run an automated script without anyone triggering it each time. And if we look at what function is likely running automatically, it's probably this time record here. The milliseconds and seconds are going up over time, meaning that this bat file is likely to keep track of this relay's construction over time. And with Gamble basically saying that this tease is connected to the new N7, I think it's safe to say that this bat file is being run by the Shepard AI, meaning that one of the Shepard AI's purposes is to monitor the construction of this Alliance-built relay. And very importantly, this last clue here shows that it's monitoring the relay during a year that contradicts the distress signal it's receiving. This date here reads November 7th and some year ending in 90, which completely opposes the Andromeda distress signal from 2819. Just thinking about this logically, the Epsilon tease directly included the audio transcript from Liara, which was said during a year that ended with 90. So to me, this means that the Shepard AI executing this code and hearing Liara didn't happen decades or centuries apart, but rather almost simultaneously. Again, I'll try making sense of this contradiction in my next video, but if we examine what happened with the Alliance during the Reaper War, we can narrow down the relay date and why the Alliance might have built this Shepard AI using logic. Since the Alliance's inception, it was governed by a parliament based at Arcturus Station, which also served as the Alliance's capital. However, during the Reaper War, this station was completely obliterated, effectively eliminating all of the Alliance's top leadership. And as we know, the main Alliance leadership on Earth was also annihilated, which left Anderson, Shepard, and Hackett in charge of all humanity. But depending on your choices, potentially two of those three are also no longer present after the end of the Reaper War. And not only that, Earth was the primary battlefield for the Reaper War, meaning that countless top soldiers were very likely killed, leaving the Alliance in a position of vulnerability with no solid leadership and with a depleted military. So if we think logically about what we're seeing now with the Shepard AI, it makes a ton of sense. The commander was the best soldier the Alliance ever produced, so naturally, with reduced military strength, they might turn to replicating Shepard in AI form, which is why I believe the year in the relay footage is actually 2190, 4 years after the end of the Reaper War. And again, we'll make sense of the 2819 date in the next video, but I do think it's very possible for this date contradiction to be occurring. Leaving that aside though, let's examine the next encryption the Shepard AI received. After putting the Oculon 2819 Defiance code from before into a URL, this is the next cipher the N7 was given. As we see here, the AI has a high enough access to view classified briefing materials on official Alliance comms channels, which to me solidifies that it's not a rogue AI. It's literally been built by the Alliance to replace Shepard. Or has it? Now, even though I just went over how it would make sense for the Alliance to have built this N7, I think its construction is a lot more complicated than it appears to be. Because even though the Shepard AI is wearing N7 armor and is likely working for the Alliance around 2190, something very fishy is going on, which Liara herself revealed in the relay audio from earlier.
Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate 5's in different plans. How did we miss this?
While looking at the relay, Liara seems to have said, "I can see it. How did we miss this?" Now, in a separate Gamble tweet that included Liara's defiance line, he also included her roles of being a doctor and the Shadow Broker. Leaving aside what her redacted role could be, if she is still the Shadow Broker, then her missing the construction of an Alliance-built relay seems very unlikely. She has agents scattered all over the galaxy, monitoring basically everything, so the only way she could have missed something like this is if the Alliance intentionally hid it from her. Something deeper is going on in humanity's top organization, which Liara is only finding out about now, on November 7th, 2190. And I think the way she's finding out about it puts her in grave danger. When we first received this relay tease on N7 Day 2022, Gamble had included the video file in a blog that said this: "We've intercepted some strange footage from one of the monitoring stations in known space. It could be nothing, but ... And when we download the video, the file itself is named SA Intercept Cytherium System Doc 314. So this file of the relay has been intercepted from the Systems Alliance, which implies that this footage that Liara intercepted was not willingly handed to her, and she's clearly very confused as if she's seeing it for the first time. So very likely, what this file name is telling us is that Liara, as the Shadow Broker, intercepted Systems Alliance footage in 2190 without permission, which we've already seen is very possible with her resources as the broker. Back in Mass Effect 2, Liara had access to intercepted footage from all over the galaxy via this video surveillance access point. It could show places like Omega, the Citadel, and even Tuchanka, intercepted from surveillance cameras in those areas. And this relay footage is likely no different. However, because she viewed this Alliance relay construction without permission, I believe this now puts Liara in the crosshairs of the Shepard AI. We know with high certainty that the N7 was watching the relay and was likely tasked with monitoring its construction. And we also know that it met with a Krogan in a facility that contained Cerberus-colored canisters over here. Leaving aside the connection between the Shepard AI and the Krogan until the third video of this series, these Cerberus canisters are the main connection to who really controls the Alliance, and who's likely after Liara, because the Alliance-built relay is also branded in Cerberus's orange colors, instead of the usual blue and gray. And since Gamble already drew the connection between the new N7 and the relay's construction, I think it's pretty obvious that the one really controlling the Alliance is actually Cerberus, which makes sense with our logic from earlier. If this relay is being constructed in the year 2190, that's only 4 years after the Reaper War, and it's also only 4 years after the Alliance's leadership was gutted with the destruction of Arcturus Station and Earth's leadership too. So if there's been a power vacuum at the top of the Alliance since then, it comes as no surprise that Cerberus managed to worm its way to the top in only 4 years. And if we even include teases outside of Mass Effect 5, the Mass Effect team was leaving crumbs about this nefarious shift within the Alliance in the book Mass Effect Initiation. In that book, the founder of the Andromeda Initiative, Gian Garson, revealed to Cora Harper that human-based groups like the Alliance are all just marching to the baton of an invisible conductor. And of those 3 human-led groups, the Alliance, HomeAway, and Homeward Soul, there was an ad later in the book that read, "Homeward Soul, humans for humankind," which implies that this invisible conductor, who Garson said controls the Alliance, has a pro-human stance. And now, in 2190, the Alliance's constructed relay has Cerberus's colors, along with their newly built Shepard AI walking in what's likely a Cerberus facility. Obviously, Cerberus is the top pro-human group we know of, so I feel very comfortable theorizing that the Alliance is secretly being run by Cerberus, and that this Shepard AI, under Cerberus's control, has been given orders to monitor the construction of this new relay, which puts it on a direct collision course with Liara. After the N7 reviewed the briefing materials on official Alliance comms channels, it finally received the last code, where we see that it detected a warning, and also it detected a security breach. Based on the theory so far, this security breach is by none other than Liara, who intercepted Alliance footage from the nearby monitoring station. And the next orders the N7 received were to contact the system's Alliance, which actually means it received orders from Cerberus. This then leads to the full clip of the N7, with the music in the clip solidifying its role as one of the next antagonists in Mass Effect 5. After seeing the Shepard AI's helmet, the music clearly turned more sinister and evil, showing us that the reason it pulled out its pistol was for something pretty bad. And as we know from its connection to the relay footage, one of its primary purposes for Cerberus is to monitor the relay's completion. But Liara breaching the Alliance's monitoring station likely means, at least to Cerberus, that the relay's construction is now at risk. So when the Shepard AI pulls out its pistol, it most likely got orders from Cerberus to eliminate Liara. To me, this is the only theory that makes sense by connecting all the teases we've seen so far. And this type of plot point story-wise also makes sense if our actual Shepard returns. IRL, AIs replacing humans are a huge issue right now, and I think a plotline of the original Shepard versus an AI Shepard could easily be what the next Mass Effect is setting up. And I think that's also partially why Gamble planted the idea of what's a person to us. This theme of whether this N7 AI is actually a person like Shepard will likely be one of the bigger plot points throughout Mass Effect 5. To be clear though, I don't think Shepard v Shepard is the main plot, but rather a subplot, similar to how the Shepard AI clearly knows the earlier Krogan since it nods to them. To see what I actually think Mass Effect 5's main plot is though, watch this video next to see why our original Shepard's return is almost essential for what's to come. See you there.
Logging you out, P7.